when you're like a creator, you also tend to follow other creators, or you'll see what other creators are posting, or you'll see
Hmm.
trends get repeated, and you kind of do feel like I need to kneel and throw hot dogs at my face. I'm like, well, or I don't, and that's not the kind of content I want to. Welcome back to On the Horizon. This is Melrose Michaels. I am your host, and I'm here to share what's worked for me in building my adult creator business to try to make building yours just a little bit easier. Let's get into today's episode. Cecelia Sommer isn't just exploring the world. She's redefining what it means to work in it. And as an anchor for Naked News, with over a decade of experience across Canada, the US, and Europe, she's seen how culture, policy, and stigma shape sex work on a global scale. So, how do you build stability when every country plays by different rules? What does sexual freedom really look like when the laws don't exactly agree with it? And how do you stay passionate in an industry that never stops evolving? Today, Cecilia is breaking down what it means to build a global career as an adult creator and the mindset that it takes to thrive in it. Cecilia, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to have you on here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, I have seen you in passing at so many conferences. This
Yeah.
was bound to happen. I think the first thing we should probably do is have you share a little bit about kind of who you are and what your journey in the industry has looked like so far, just so everyone has some context.
Yeah, of course. So, I started in the sex work industry, have been in it for quite some time, as you mentioned. I originally started off as a provider, as a means to earn money, and that definitely transformed into something I hadn't really thought I was making a career out of. So, I've dropped out of university several times. Wasn't the right time, the place, the system structure of university wasn't conducive for me. So when I got into sex work, it was just really something that fit for my personality and me as a person. I love the human element of it. I feel like I'm a really good people person, and I loved the dressing up. I loved feeling pretty and being worshipped and appreciated and making a difference, even if just for a moment. So, I worked in spas briefly as well, and I hated it. And, I eventually moved to becoming independent and, had higher standards of practice for myself, for individuals that I was seeing in terms of safety protocols, price points. And then, 2020 hit and I started joining these modeling meetups. I made myself an Instagram. I was doing collabs with other Instagram models and photographers, and I was really networking online. But then COVID hit. So I had to move all of my practices to Zoom calls, and I had never done anything like camera or content creation before. But of course, being the hot trend that was going on and everything I was seeing on social media, in December of 2021, I decided to make an OnlyFans. So I wasn't sure how I felt about being in public like that and face out, but it opened a lot of doors. So having that platform and having the modeling Instagram, I was noticed by Ayla Adams. She asked me to come in for an interview for Naked News, and I got the job. So since that point, I had been doing online work. I was in the studio when the doors were allowed to be opened with restrictions. And, I started going to conventions. I was traveling all over the States for them. I was in Europe and Berlin for Venus Awards, Amsterdam XBiz about 3 times. I was even going to Estonia and Tulum for content trips. So, it really opened a whole world that I didn't even know existed. I know people who did content, but I never knew content creators. And, I was in the circles. I started becoming parts of these communities, and I was no longer on my own. So, I started doing some professional shoots. I started collabing with other industry professionals, and now we are here.
It is such a wonderful evolution of your career. And I think I relate to you heavily on something that you said, which is that now you're like a part of these communities, like
Mhm.
I did start in cams given where I felt very isolated. Like I wasn't going to conferences or shows. I wasn't doing content meetups. I wasn't doing anything like that at first. And I really felt like my career took off once I got involved in the community.
Yeah. Hmm.
It makes such a difference. Like if you had to put an importance on that, like for the creators that are going to listen to this, what would you say the importance of that is?
Community is so important. I mean, you network with other people, you share tips, you share insights, you share safety between other performers, other producers. You also share like experiences. So, I think it's hard traveling over to the States, especially as a Canadian or really anybody trying to come into there. And that's such a huge hub for meeting creators, going to conventions. And it is really, really risky. You have to make sure that your phone doesn't have anything suspicious on it, and just being able to talk to people and like know these things. Again, a lot of stuff isn't known. So when you're part of these communities, you really get the benefits of all of that kind of knowledge that really helps you, feel more together and be in a space that actually is going to benefit you.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think when we think about the like acquired knowledge over time for having a longer career, it is such a cumulative process. Like if I look back in my early days in this work, I really didn't know anything. And you don't know what you don't know is the
Yeah,
problem.
exactly.
And that's like to your point where this community aspect comes in. When you think about longevity in adult specifically, what do you think helped you sustain yourself through all of those different eras in the industry?
Definitely the collaboration helped a lot. I think it's important to have like a goal setting when you're in an industry like this. You don't want to lose sight of what your values are and what you're working towards. Is really, really important. It's also about like adaptability for sure. I mean, whether there's new things coming out like AI or just different laws that are coming through, especially if you're traveling between different countries. There's so many things that you have to keep up on. And I think it's really, really important to just stay on top of that in order to make sure that your career does flourish the way that you want it to.
Yeah, you've touched already on some things, especially with crossing borders and like trying to expand your career globally that I would love to dig into because I think it's going to bring so much value to the people that hear this episode. So you've worked across, Canada, US, Europe, in all of these regions, they handle online sex work so differently.
Yeah.
So I think before even talking about like maybe things to watch out for, I would be curious when you look at those markets, like side by side,
Mhm.
is there anything individually about any of them that stands out to you?
Oh, 100%. So, between these different markets, what really it comes down to is how they view sex work in general. This leads to the most inherently the safety and working conditions of the sex workers. So, for instance, Canada is mostly decriminalized. Canada's model aims to protect the workers and criminalize the client or the fan. Europe, on the other hand, has more widespread acceptance and allowances. Many countries are fully decriminalized sex work, Germany, Belgium, especially the Netherlands. And they actually provide standard labor rights, which actually opens more online environments. And then, we have a very stark contrast with the US, where they've actually shut down major advertising sites. They've placed such heavy restrictions on online platforms for users on both sides of the platform. It's basically driving a lot of sex work underground. And, with each of these legal approaches, it definitely affects the market and therefore it affects the worker.
Yeah, when we're looking at these regions specifically, obviously Canada is kind of like the home base for you.
Yeah.
What does that current landscape look like for online sex workers in this moment?
So, yeah, I mean, it's great that it can provide, a digital experience, which, has a little bit more privacy than maybe opposed to being in person for a lot of people. When that opened up, it was great because, especially again during COVID, it left a lot of avenues to go into when people didn't have other resources. The downside, of course, with anything online is surveillance, content theft, being deplatformed by certain service providers. Now, that's not unlike anywhere else. That is still very common. But again, through sex work and it's decriminalized, it's not necessarily to make it legal over here. So therefore, there is little recourse when you are deplatformed happens. For like, there's also no like standard job security such as healthcare, sick pay, or other benefits. I did notice though that there was a little bit of a social shift in Canada. I mean, there's definitely more social acceptance. I can go into a room with people who aren't in the industry, who don't know me, and I have no shame saying, I do OnlyFans. I'm an online sex worker. Of course, there's still people out there who are going to give you the eye roll and have assumptions about who you are as a person. But I think because COVID, there were so many people that decided to try this, didn't have other options or just wanted to get in on the trend. that because people who wouldn't necessarily identify as sex workers or content creators, there were so many of them that people knew at least one person who's done OnlyFans. And there was so much more of a humanization that came out of that in the public eye.
Yeah. It's interesting because even the label has evolved so much over time. Like I remember when I was getting into cams, it was like the online, I guess, conversations around adult work was that like a cam girl could only be a cam girl. We couldn't consider ourselves porn stars. We couldn't consider ourselves sex
Mhm.
workers.
Yeah.
And then like over time that's evolved and the term sex work has grown to encompass so much else. And now with the adult content creation, we've, put that into the sex work category as well. Like any kind of erotic art, even ASMR these days is being considered sex work, which is it's just interesting to see how things evolve over time. And to your point, with so many people, coming into OF post COVID for whatever reason, it does kind of help blur those lines of stigma, at least to some degree. It's
Hmm.
moved the needle.
Yeah.
Um, and comparing Canada to the US, obviously, US, we're up against a plethora of age verification laws and nonsense right now. I'm personally in a state that criminalizes adult online work,
Yeah.
so I feel it myself. But when we compare, over here to Europe, it almost feels more like a patchwork of cultural laws and attitudes just because, so many countries all in one place. I'm wondering, are there kind of countries or systems that you think in Europe are getting it right, like in terms of protecting workers and still supporting, I guess, their independence?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's countries like I mentioned, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, and some Scandinavian countries too, like Sweden. They're actually legalizing and regulating the industry, which includes social benefits, health insurance, labor rights. They all differ to some extent. I mean, Germany, for instance, has a regulated tax system. The Netherlands have completely decriminalized sex work, meaning they can set their own conditions. And, Belgium did the same with that, but also they allowed like labor rights, paid leave, health insurance, basically the same equalities of a, quote, normal job. And all of these things together have started protecting human rights and the recognition of sex work.
And that's where all of the difference gets made, really. I think that countries that are really on the decrim side or are standardizing the work conditions for
Mhm.
creators, sex workers, whatever label you want to attribute, like they're really pushing us forward. Like that's where the future of these things lies because then they have the data and evidence to support that these models work, which is like often what gets pointed to in the US or some of the countries that are more fear mongery around sex work. It's like,
Yeah.
they try to point to we're saving the children or we're reducing trafficking, where like none of this numbers or evidence support that. But you look at a model like over in the Netherlands or like to your point, Scandinavia, and like the actual evidence and data supports that those models of legalize or decrim work.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a huge difference, and
Hmm.
I wish people just used evidence to make fucking decisions. It
Yeah,
would be
exactly.
so
Right.
much better. Oh my goodness. If you're enjoying this podcast episode so far, please take one moment to share it with another one of your adult content creator friends because you know what the rule is here. We do not gatekeep, and we want to make as many adult creators' businesses as easy as possible. And you sharing this episode with them might do exactly that. Thanks so much in advance. Because you are you're so global and you're effective at it, I'm wondering, do you feel like the audiences feel different, like a European audience base compared to a US or to a Canadian audience base?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely changes from region to region, depending on what cultural values they have, economic factors, social norms. I mean, for example, say a region that has a lot of stigma and secrecy around sex in general, conservative backgrounds, their need for privacy and, anonymous payment methods cause greater pain to protect their identity. So, this can include having smaller, more discreet payments made. I mean, if you look at sites like Pornhub and other porn sites, like you said, the ID verification is pushing more people away from these larger platforms, because they're scared about their privacy. They're scared about content leaks. They're scared about personal information being sold. And, there's economic factors like fans in higher income countries or jobs tend to have a higher spending capacity, purchasing premium content. In North America, typically, a higher spend per fan is paying for subscriptions, tipping higher amounts. In Europe, more privacy concerns are seen. So the price points on content in Europe is often lower. So that may affect the North American performers' income if that's where a lot of their fan base is located. And then, there's countries like even Latin America who value community. The fans from Latin America really value and love community. But because many have lower disposable incomes, there are smaller payments or what we could call like micro tips. So it really just depends on the region that your fan base is that will affect different earning structures or even just different interactions.
Yeah, I thought about this a lot from like a strategic standpoint. Like obviously I know a lot of executives, I'm sure you do too in the industry, and it's kind of like a known thing that the US market, US audience is the golden ticket, like
Yeah.
higher exposable income and the way they value things, and also just I guess because it's pushed underground to maybe not that it thrives in reality, but there's this secrecy around it. So I feel like fans want to support privately their favorite people.
Hmm.
And there's some loyalty bred there because it's like, I'm on your team. I want to see you kind of win. But beyond that, I've thought a lot about like, a creator could launch their like socials, for example, and, with the power of AI and things we can do now, they could dub all of their posts or their reels or their content into like Arabic and try to go after like a Saudi Arabian market with crazy expendable income. And I've seen creators do these things where they'll like really target a region and like go for it because, for example, like if I was to go for an Arabic market, I would stand out because I'd be, white, American, conventionally, whatever. Like it would be kind of the competition would be low, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Hmm.
Have you noticed creators or seen creators do this or like just the idea of targeting specific regions for some competitive advantage? Because I think that's a route people could take that often isn't really talked about.
No, that's actually an excellent point. I mean, I haven't heard of any creators doing that, so maybe I'll think about that myself. But it's definitely one of those things where it's really good to be inclusive and definitely think about where else you can, expand your audience. That's definitely super important to be able to do, and create that parasocial relationship between cultures and the aspects of sex and online content, and sort of helping breach that shame about it. Yeah, I haven't actually done it myself personally, but that's interesting to hear. Yeah.
It's something that's crossed my mind too. Like if I got so if I could just post to social consistently and really like nail that, and then cross post and like dub everything to another language, like oh man, there's so many markets I'd want to go after. It sounds like I don't know, some secret master plan, like Pinky and the Brain style that I'll attack down the road.
Yeah,
um,
yeah, for sure.
you've spoken about understanding your target market and like that was one of the biggest lessons of your career. I'm wondering, how did that play out when your audience suddenly became global? Like, did you have to shift your content or your tone or even your boundaries to kind of connect with different people in different cultures and different countries?
Yeah, so one thing that I'm still adapting is that I want to learn how to be more authentic in myself and how I want to be represented online and the kind of fans I want to attract. So for me personally, when my audience became global, I didn't necessarily change my approach. I didn't change my tone, I didn't change my content or my boundaries because I wasn't necessarily catering to a particular culture or region, but rather a personality archetype that can be found within individuals in various cultures from all over. I think that was the biggest thing was the authenticity and nature of who I was and, having the right fans that would connect with you regardless of that cultural predisposition.
Oh, you're speaking to my soul right now. That is, I think, my biggest current challenge is feeling, and which people aren't going to believe when I say this, but I've said it before. It's like, I really feel like I need to improve being authentically myself online. And I
Mhm.
think it is so hard. Like, that's a really challenging task. I don't know. Is there anything that you're doing right now that you feel like helps you show up more authentically? Like, how do you even approach that?
I mean, I've done some cringy things online. Like I look back at some things and I'm like, what are you even doing? Whether it's a live
We've all.
stream or content, and I'm like, that's not even me. And you get
Yeah.
swept up in it. It just becomes like a weird persona that takes over. And I've really had to start like dialing it back and just kind of catching myself. I mean, sometimes I just record things and watch them back and I'm like, okay, do it like this because that's who you are. And you kind of have to retrain yourself a little bit. Sometimes I like giggle after everything and I'm like, nothing's funny, girl.
Yeah.
What are you doing? but you're trying to make somebody feel bubbly and welcome and smiley. But then you're laughing like an idiot. Stop laughing like an idiot.
Yeah.
Just be normal. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely really hard for sure, especially when you started out being a certain way and now you kind of have to, become more yourself and the audience is gonna have to be on that journey with you.
Yeah, I think like there's a time, and also it's like it speaks to the parasocial relationships in the social media era we're into to some degree, because when you're like a creator, you also tend to follow other creators, or you'll see what other creators are posting, or you'll see
Hmm.
trends get repeated, and you kind of do feel like you have to do the same thing. Like,
Yep.
I don't know what that urge is, but it's so human where we all are like, oh no, I need to kneel and throw hot dogs at my face. I'm like, well, or I don't, and that's not the kind of content I want to.
You know what? It's so funny too, because I've noticed this kind of similar thing that I do subconsciously. If you're at a club or you're out dancing with friends or whatever, somebody around you's dancing and you start mimicking their movements. You don't even notice you're doing it. It's the same thing. You watch something online and you just start doing it. And even if it's like your conscious, like, oh, now I need to go and get hot dogs. Your subconscious is playing on that. And then you're like, wait, why did I even do that? It's so weird how you just kind of start to mimic and, it happens even just when you're watching other people online. Even if it's not you, it's still something that your brain just taps into and is like, I should do that.
It's completely true. And it's so strange too, because I just did a bunch of research. Like there's some trends that are simple enough to do, and you can take the trend or like the core idea of it and really change it to fit you authentically in your brand, right?
Hmm.
Like especially right now where people are just putting text on screen over anything and it'll replay because the text is long to read and then you get the watch time, whatever.
Yeah.
So like you can put up any video of yourself that's authentic to you, write whatever you want over it, and it'll, it's a trend, it'll work. But a lot of the whole trending thing, like the first person to do it where it takes off really wins. And like the maybe 3 to 5 after them that ride it also win in the trending thing. But beyond that, it usually just flops. Like it doesn't land the same way. And I'm almost thinking like we've really entered this age of social media marketing where people it really rewards authenticity. Like it really rewards
Hmm.
originality.
Hmm.
And those are hard to achieve, just genuinely. It's an interesting time on social marketing.
It is, yeah.
I really think that operations can be a struggle for the average creator. And I'm wondering if there's operational differences that maybe creators don't think about when it comes to crossing borders. Like, for example, to think of some like payout systems, currency exchanges, or, different taxation between like US and Canada. Have you experienced any of those? And how did you approach them?
Yeah, so there's definitely operational differences. I mean, when you cross the border, I personally, when I went to the UK, I had to get a Wise account in order to be able to get paid for certain shoots and work that I did, which is an international currency app. I was also, in some respects, offered a lower rate when I was in the UK for a professional scene, but I was okay with that. I mean, it wasn't because I wasn't big or famous enough or able to demand more. It was more so that was the industry standard pricing at that time for that region. And, especially for some smaller companies, they only have certain budgets. And, I also factored in the fact that the reality is that the Canadian dollar is so low. So that exchange rate on the pound was actually so good for me. It ended up making the money that I made from that shoot above market value. So, I mean, working professionally within the US, however, there's definitely issues with work visas. I have not been able to shoot professionally in the States because of that issue, which wasn't really so much of an issue when I traveled to Europe. In terms of taxation, I mean, between Canada and the US, living in one country and earning on a platform that has customers or payout processors from another, raises certain questions about that country's tax systems and what's going to apply. I mean, luckily for Canada, there's the Canadian US treaty, which, business profits of someone self employed are generally taxed to the resident of that country, which is good. So it prevents double taxation. Personal example though, in other ways, I made a flashlight product and I can't receive payment for that until I was able to complete a specific form, which was a W-8BEN, which is for non-US persons. So that was something else that I came across that I didn't think. I just thought, oh yeah, I'm just going to be able to get paid. No, I had to do a specific tax form for that company, for that country. So, I mean, meaning US payers apply the right to withhold a rate, and there are many other factors of tax and law that we can go into, but I think those are some of the ones that I personally dealt with and that I think are like just basic that you can kind of anyone can relate to. It's a little bit digestible.
Yeah, no, those are great examples. And I've experienced that too. Like when I only shot two professional scenes for Slade and Vixen Media Group
Hmm.
overseas, and having to like fill out their forms, go by their standards. Also, I have friends that are trying to get US visas to come work in the US. Like these things are very complex
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
also a little bit intimidating, I would
Yeah.
say. Especially if you don't have any kind of person or support who has the experience to kind of guide you or answer some questions or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I think expanding your audience globally can actually be pretty daunting.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious for you, is that something you set out to do, or is that something that happened by like happenstance?
You know what? So Canada's funny like that. I mean, we don't have a lot of like production companies. We don't have a lot of creators up here. It's a little bit more sparse. I mean, if you go to somewhere like the States, LA, Miami, Vegas, I mean, they're just everywhere. They are everywhere. And, because there is Brazzers UK, there is, Vixen over there in Europe. There's a lot of bigger companies over in Europe as well. So it was just something that kind of happened. I mean, the States I was always a little bit scared about, and I just feel more comfortable in Europe. But yeah, when I was in Europe traveling for myself, it was one of those things where I just reached out to a couple companies and I was like, hey, I happen to be in your country. Any chance you'd like to work together? Or sometimes it was like word of mouth from somebody else that I knew who was like, hey, let me give you a recommendation or let me put in a good word for you. So it wasn't something I necessarily set out to do. I just took a few of the little opportunities where they landed and was also really excited to gain that professional experience. I mean, you can make your own content, you can do collaborations, but it's really cool being on set. And it's really cool working with different people and not having to be the producer, the cameraman, the director, and all these other hats that you have to wear, and just show up and be the talent.
Yeah, that's so true. It was a very different experience showing up for my studio scenes than I was used to, just because I'd never done anything mainstream before.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, given I wouldn't say I was unprepared. Like I had the best, like amazing team and they were incredible. But I'm coming from fucking 14 years of being an independent content creator and then going and being on set for 16 to 18 hours. I was like, wow, this is brutal. Like
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
hard work. Oh my gosh. And it was like, wow, like the sex of it was like 45 minutes, but the day was forever.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely heard that too from other people where, like, they do the hair and makeup, then they shoot the scene, but then they have to take pictures. So they have to go back and redo the hair and makeup. And it's like, what?
Yeah, it is. It is a different beast, truly.
Yeah.
For creators that are going to hear this and who are like really thinking about expanding their audience or even just working abroad, one of the things I get asked a lot, which I have experience traveling, but I have traveled more for conferences and like work things than necessarily for shoots.
Yeah.
I've only traveled a little bit for shoots because I am not super collaboration heavy in this last couple years.
Yeah.
But what are the things that stand out to you if you're going to travel to a country that you should research ahead of time or know to pack, not to pack, your devices? Like, what is the things that stand out to you that creators should really know or research?
Oh God. I mean, it's so hard because it's better when you know someone who can kind of say this was my experience. But definitely for creators who dream about working, traveling abroad or internationally, and that means anywhere, not just the places that I've mentioned, understand the sex work laws and where not to travel. Like, I mean, location definitely matters. Like, if you're filming abroad, even doing collabs or solo work, that could be seen as producing pornography. That can be illegal in some countries, and if you have a tourist visa, you're actually not allowed to work, even if it's a collab or an online or something. That doesn't apply. So you are actually violating your tourist visa. And I mean, if you get caught doing that, you can have it taken away, you can be kicked out, and be aware of the digital laws, privacy and decency. I mean, local laws, immigration rules, regulations for filming in private spaces. I mean, I think we've all heard the horror stories of people getting kicked off Airbnb because someone found, hey, you shot in my part, like my condo, or hey, I saw my like place on this chat. Like, so you also have to check in the morality laws for that region, the taxation, if you should be, putting taxes on that region that you're coming into or not. You have to maintain a home country address. If you go into another country and you don't have that and you're shooting or working, even if it's again just doing something like collabs, it can be really bad. And there's things like bank account freezing from adult production companies. So I mean, if you get paid by an adult production company and it goes into your bank account and they're like, oh, we don't like that, depending on where you were from also, that could happen. So you definitely got to know the culture and religious dynamics and restrictions. And I think it just comes down to doing the research of the destination that you are going, and especially where you are from. So, bottom line, just like be smart, don't be lazy in this. Make sure you have like cross your T's, dot your I's, because a simple mistake can really ruin like a huge chunk of your life.
Yeah, no, this is I love that you mentioned all of the above because I think, I guess the last year or so, there's and maybe even longer than that, there's like creators hanging out in Bali and these beautiful places. And
Hmm.
I mentioned, I'm like, you guys, like, it's illegal to shoot or distribute content in Bali. Like, they have prison sentences
Yeah.
if you,
Yeah.
and like, I think creators, it can be easy, especially coming from the US, where we have this privilege of our passport where it's not necessarily hard to go to other countries. And we think of things as very simple. And you wouldn't get arrested bringing a sex toy into our country, so we don't think about it for other places.
Mhm.
So it can be very easy to accidentally fuck up your life and your career by going across a border that you haven't taken the time to do some simple research, or you have something on your phone that they're gonna take as completely different than how your home country would perceive it. So this one, I really hope that creators hear this and they take time to do that research and don't just go to ChatGPT or use AI. AI hallucinates, guys. Like, do proper research. This is so important. So, so important. You talked about recessions as well. So, like,
Yeah.
you've talked about the current recession in North America and that being a real factor affecting creators. I could not agree
Hmm.
more.
Hmm.
From your perspective, how is that kind of like economic pressure showing up in the adult space right now, whether that's spending patterns of fans or subscription retention or even, I guess, brand deals or studio shoots kind of drying up?
Yeah, it's definitely a huge factor for income for creators. I mean, some people aren't affected by it. I mean, I'm still doing okay, but Canada really is taking a hit. It's taking a hit in terms of the processors that are in America as well, because I mean, I didn't realize this, but some of my Canadian fans, they go on OnlyFans. I price a video for 19.99. I didn't realize my Canadian fans were actually paying the American exchange rate on that video. And I was like, oh, you're not paying this price.
Wow.
You're actually paying more than what I'm selling it as. And I didn't realize that, so just little things like that. A lot of people lost their jobs, are unable to get more work. So they don't have the same disposable income that they did before. One of the things that I did notice where, a lot of creators think that they're failing because they aren't pulling, the hundreds of thousands a month. I mean, the biggest factor is that the 0.1% of creators, the one that are earning on average like $150,000 a month, I mean, it's a disproportionately large share of the revenue. And most creators make very little, with some, higher and a little bit more of an average range. And, fans are cutting back. It's hurting the smaller creators and the mid-low earners. I mean, there's, again, like I said, no more extra disposable income, but there's also more competition between creators and more people coming out of the woodworks and everything. And, fans have to, like, sometimes they're like, oh, I can't afford to buy your content. I'm just going to be a voyeur. Or, they can't afford to subscribe across multiple creators. So they have to cut back to the ones, and, you might not make that cut.
Yeah, that's very true. I think that's such a misnomer. Like when creators, they always reference these models that are making 100K a month, a million a month, like these crazy numbers. But you can go on something as simple as like Gig Social and you can like look and scroll as if you're going to buy promo from these models. A lot of them have their OAFs connected. You can see their percentage. And I can tell you from my own like history, the my highest earning month on OF at some point was over 50K a month. That was like my best like peak month. And when I was in that bracket, I was 0.01% on OF.
Mm-hmm.
So if 50K can get you into 0.01, those models earning millions a month or hundreds of thousands a month, they're like 0.000, like they're such a small number. There's probably only, I would even guess, even from the agency experiences I have and like knowing the agency products and backend and how they rank agencies,
Mm-hmm.
there's probably maybe 1,000 creators in the world
Yeah.
making six figures or more a month. And that's being conservative, I would say. I'd say it's probably less, but to be conservative,
Mm-hmm.
let's say 1,000. So like all of those articles and all of that stuff, like it hypes up what we do and it makes you compare yourself so unrealistically to the economy, to the region, to other creators, and to what like a baseline healthy and quote unquote successful career looks like. And it could be so easy to like lose that game.
Yeah.
That
Mm-hmm.
comparison is the thief of joy. And because I'm not making six figures, I'm failing. Like that's not how it works.
Yeah.
Like, are you paying your bills and independently supporting yourself? Like, you got to define success, I think, as whatever it means to you. And I think we so quickly can lose sight of that.
Yeah. No, exactly. I 100% agree. 100% agree. Yeah.
I am curious if because you do a lot of collaboration in times that are like economically hard, do you think collaboration becomes like a strategy or part of survival, like just as a way to stay visible and keep revenue consistent as sales dip? Like, what do you think makes collaboration actually work, I guess, for both creators involved?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important that if you are going to do collaborations, because there's tons of people that work completely solo and they're very successful. But I think what does work well for collaborations is, overlapping fan interests. So the audience compatibility. So that's working with someone that might have the same aesthetics as you, the same ethnicity, either that or like the same compatible niches. If one's doing a little bit more subby work or dom work or whatever, you play into that a little bit more because you want to reach the audience that is looking at people similar to you that maybe haven't recognized you yet. So that's always really good. Having clear and detailed expectations before a shoot is super important. I mean, and you want to have a good balance exchange. I mean, larger creators to smaller creators. There's some larger creators that have no problem working with smaller creators, and there's some that don't. And, the smaller ones need sometimes the opportunities and they end up having to do more smaller instead of maybe getting with someone who has a huge Instagram or X following. And, social media influence is definitely huge. I mean, you take a picture with somebody, you're automatically almost kind of like vouched for. You earn the trust of that person's platform for yourself as well. The big thing is, though, I think is where you don't have to take it, like, do not take it personally. Like, if you don't get to do the collab that you want, or, the person that you reached out to doesn't get back to you, or, they do, but then they flake, you kind of just have to take it and be like, okay, fine, whatever, you do research, you pick somebody else, and, always just make sure that you have professionalism. I mean, you want good credibility in the future from other creators. You want to be getting those recommendations. And like I said, in these industries, you're building community, you're networking. And, it's super, super important to have that and to make sure that you do all of that appropriately. So yeah, the collaboration is really important. And again, even just like taking a picture with someone posting on social media, like I've done interviews for Naked News on the red carpet for things, and I'll post that on my social media and like repost them. It doesn't necessarily always have to be, content on the sex work side. It can also just be safe for work, cross branding.
Yeah, 100%. I think that collabs is something we actually get asked a lot about because creators, especially that are newer or going to conferences for the first time where they're going to cross paths with creators, they don't know where to start in terms of asking for a collab or like how to approach or what you can and can't say. Like if someone's going to ask you for a lab or a collab, Cece, what is the appropriate way you would want them to go about it?
Honestly, I prefer when somebody like reaches out with a little bit of like an introduction. Like I hate it when I just get a DM being like, "Want to collab?" And I'm just like, "No, not really." like I like it when somebody reaches out. They have like, "Hey, I'm so and so. Here's a couple of my references, or these are my pages. If you want to take a look at who I am, this is the kind of stuff that I like to shoot. Are you interested in that?" Kind of just like establish boundaries and a little bit of just like a good attitude going forward. I mean, definitely reach out, like I said, in a professional manner. I mean, I think people think that doing sex work you don't have to use proper sentence structures or write the full word available. I just
Yeah.
I like that sort of thing. That just shows to me that you're showing me respect and that you're trying to take this professionally. I mean, it's just like any other job. Like you don't write an email to the government with broken English or anything. So why would you write a collab request to me in the same manner? That's just a personal thing that I like. But also, too, I think it's really, really important to have everything discussed if you are thinking about doing a collab. I mean, if it doesn't feel right, just listen to your gut. Don't ghost, don't flake. Just say, hey, you know what? Something came up. I don't think this is the right collab for me. And do what you need to do.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. I was also wondering too, because you've done the content trips and a lot of content trips. So
Yeah.
when you're going into the kind of that environment, what does collaboration look like there?
So the content trips have been really, really interesting. I mean, we've done some in Tulum, with Cam 4 and Cam 4 models. And, all the girls that come through are so lovely. And you kind of just like get to know them because you're living there with them for a couple of days. It's almost like when you go to camp, you automatically just instantly bond and, you get to see like who you want to work with. It's really, really fun. Again, it's just about negotiating. I mean, I think one of the biggest things is when do you release the content? What are we pricing it for? Because you want to be on that same page. It's definitely happened before, and I'm guilty of this too, where I accidentally release something or I price it differently and someone's like, hey, why would you do that? And I was like, oh my God, you're totally right. I thought we had talked about this. I didn't. So the content trips can be really good for networking, and just even having like new experiences to shoot and meet. But yeah, the content trips are definitely, if anybody has the opportunity to do them, I would say go for it. Just make sure again you're doing your research, like that the if it's being, produced by somebody, make sure that you actually are going to get your content. Make sure that if they say we're going to pay for your flights or something, make sure that actually happens. Because there can be, a lot of scams out there, or you just got to play it smart for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think also the factors that I want to mention too is like if you're doing a content trip, because I've gone to content houses and there was no forms provided. So like I didn't have a 2257 that was printed. I thought like I went into the content house thinking like, okay, they're gonna have printed photo releases, printed 2257s. We're gonna be expected to show test results. Like I went in under that impression and that was not always necessarily my experience.
Yeah.
So also creators, if you're listening to this, like have a file folder printed of like
Mhm,
2257s of
mhm.
photo and video releases. And then also, I don't know if you've come across this, Cece, but maybe you can educate me. Have you ever been presented? Because I made one myself because I didn't know where to find one. But have you ever been presented kind of like like to your point, a pricing doc? Like this is what I'm willing to sell this content for in locked PPV or on Clip Store or on a feed if the subscriptions, whatever. Like, have you ever seen something like that?
Yeah, definitely. There's like people just write self-made contracts, you know what I mean? And it just kind of like goes through like the breakdowns of like yes, no's, maybes for different things. I think it's like always super important to have just to make sure that you're on the same page and that there's record of it. Because I mean, some person, and it's good to check too. I mean, somebody might forget that they said yes to something or agreed to something. So you just kind of want to have those records down. And I agree. Like there's definitely been, I was working for Naked News and we were with Cam 4. So all of my legal paperwork and everything was in order. But yeah, it's definitely one of those things where like you've heard of these content trips where like, what are we signing? Is there even anything to sign? So yeah. And especially because it's collabs, like that's the thing. Some of these content trips, they don't have like a professional production team. It's like, oh, you just kind of work with who you want to, and that's kind of up to discretion between the two parties involved or three parties or whoever's collabing with one another. So yeah, it definitely can turn out, just that way as well.
Yeah, I want to plug, this has nothing to do with me, but it's something I've been using, or this is, I guess, how I've approached this because I'm like an optimization freak. I love operations, but I personally what I did for anyone who's listening who's like concerned about the 2257 or photo release stuff and kind of a simple way to do this. This is not legal advice, so I'm going to put that out there, but this is how I've been facilitating this, is that I have a Proton email because they're encrypted emails. So it's like, whatever at 2257 at protonmail.com. And I only use this email for my 2257's photo releases, pricing information stuff. And what I do is there's an app called Quick 2257. It's by Larry Wallace, and he's the one leading all of our legislation here in the US against, the age verification and all the rest. He's like our biggest advocate. And he released this app where you can do the 2257, take photos of the ID, sign a photo release, and then send it to both parties' emails. And I just set up a specific email to kind of capture all of that. So all of my related stuff to 2257s come from this app, take the photo, gets sent to my, 2257 Proton mail, and then it's all stored in a secure way. It's encrypted. I can pull it anytime I need it. I know where to find it. So if anyone's listening and doesn't have a system in place, that's one you can use. It's like 99 cents for the app. It goes to support our legislation. It's a good cause. But just throwing that out there, if you're not familiar, I think that that's a great, at least step in the right direction. Again, not legal advice, but it's a way to approach it. I we already kind of mentioned, or I should say, you mentioned earlier, AI, which interests me because I'm a nerd. I'm wondering, for you, I'm sure you've seen, even at conferences that I know I'm also at, the new platforms and the AI tools that
Yeah.
are entering the space.
Yeah.
And I've launched an AI tool for SWCEO, so I'm wondering if there's anything that has come out lately or new technology wise that either excites you or also maybe makes you exercise caution or things you think creators should be cautious about.
Again, yeah, AI is one of those tools that, sometimes I have mixed feelings about. But
Mhm.
one thing that AI is really helpful with, especially if you're using it to make content or if you're using it for like chatbots, is the scalability that you're able to do with it for high volume demand in this industry. I mean, there's so many videos and things that need to be produced. There's so many requests and, just the demand of high volume content. It definitely is one of those things that helps. It helps with the finances and time with the consideration to in real life shoots. It can help creators experiment with fantasies in safer ways. The one thing that I think we all have to kind of think about with AI in general, it's exciting, it's new. People think it's like a get quick, get rich and famous quick cash out. But I mean, you have to be really, really cautious about, non-consensual deep fakes, intellectual property and likeness, and just being transparent to your fans that the content is in fact AI. I mean, don't lie to the users, and the AI has to work within set parameters. So keeping the actual content creator safe. I mean, I always think about, that Black Mirror episode or this movie that I saw years ago called Cam. And I just have like nightmares about the AI.
Yeah, the live cam streamer who was AI. Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah. So it's just one of those things that, like, all of these are just movies and stuff. But, the technology is coming out where if it's not used properly or if it's abused. But I mean, there's also cool stuff coming out. I mean, I hear that they're putting AI into virtual reality headsets. So, I mean, that's really combining two really cool different fields together for the user. And, I'm really excited to see where that's going to go.
Yeah, I love when the new technologies are applicable, especially to like admin or managerial tasks or like, I think that's super helpful. And I get very concerned about like AI generated content, of course. Like
Mhm.
you want to know what it's trained on. You want to know some of these like AI products or these digital twin products, like read the contracts, like you're signing away your name, likeness, your image. And I get really concerned about that because a lot of it is in perpetuity. If you don't know what that word means, it means forever and ever and ever. Like don't ever sign anything that says that. And so like I have concerns with that, but I love when it gives leverage to the creator. Like with our product GPTs, it's basically chat GPT but for adult creators.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, help me plan a content calendar, and it's going to give you written text. It's not going to make content for you or on your behalf. So I like things that give us leverage, and I'm looking forward to more tools and technology in that department. And the VR stuff is really cool too, to your point. Like that, like there's the whole studios that dedicate now and just shoot in VR. Like that's really interesting. Or the cam in VR, like Dream Cams is another one. And that's really impressive to see because what a cool experience for the user at the end of the day,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's also just bringing technology together in like a safe way. I mean, it's still the person who's in the video. I mean, I've done a VR porn before, and I loved the idea of that. I mean, it was really weird to shoot, don't get me wrong, but it was just really, really cool that I was like, because I've watched VR porn when it was animated, like this was when it early came out, and it was weird,
Yeah.
but you kind of get like lost in it, and you kind of forget you're looking at cartoons. But now they're doing it with real people, and I'm like, that's actually so cool that it's bringing it right to you. Yeah, I thought
Yeah.
that was super cool.
What was it like shooting a VR scene? Like what's so weird about it? I'm so
So
curious.
I assumed it would have been like goggles on the person's face. You know what I mean? It's not. It's this huge contraption, like a crane that comes over them, like those things you get at the eye doctors, when you're trying to look through.
Oh wow.
And the person just
Yeah.
has to stand there or lay down. So, I mean, if you're, I was the girl, they were the guy, I'm riding them, they can't move. They have to stay
Oh
perfectly still. And
wow.
I'm just like, this is so weird. Or like, you can't be intimate. Like, you can't kiss. You're not really like, I keep
Oh.
looking at the camera, which kind of looked like, chameleon eyes. And
Yeah.
it was just really like it was again, I thought it was going to be completely different, so I liked the shock factor of that. But it was
Yeah.
definitely weird, like having this gigantic thing kind of just, and again, I couldn't look at the performer, I had to look at where their eyes were supposed to be. So that was cool.
That's interesting too because like I when I was shooting or whenever I club I guess more generally like I want to really connect with the performer like I want to sell it like we are so passionately in love like I am and so not being able to make eye contact would be so hard for me to manage.
Yeah, 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 for sure. And like also too, if like you're talking to them, they can't talk back. Because obviously
Oh
it's so if
wow.
I'm like, oh yeah, do you like that? It's funny because the person who I was shooting with would just kind of lightly nod, and I was like, this is so fucking weird. Like he can't say anything because it's part of the virtual reality. The person with the headset is the one who's gonna reply because he's the one that feels like he's
Yeah.
actually there.
Oh, that's what I might actually be okay with that 'cause that's like most of my solo content is like the very girlfriend experience shop point of view,
Yeah.
but like using toys. So I'm basically yeah, I could do that.
Yeah.
I'm basically doing that.
Yeah.
Um, one of the questions I had for you is for the creators, I guess, who are listening, who are maybe feeling overwhelmed by all the change in our space. I'm wondering if there's something that is like you do or a ritual that I guess ritual is not the right word, but something you do to kind of take grounded steps like in real time that make you feel your career is a little bit more future proof, like any kind of future planning or like safeguards you put in place. Is there anything you do like that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's good to always make sure that you're branching out and like diversifying. So, I mean, even email newsletters, doing a YouTube channel, Discord groups like for the fans, just to help build your core audience. Is always good to do. I don't do a whole lot of that, but that's one of the things like I've seen other creators do that are really, really good in terms of keeping that longevity and are feeling overwhelmed and are like, how do I keep people engaged? And of course, just start doing research on things. Like, I mean, you might not want to use AI. AI might not be the avenue for you, but it is really good to feel comfortable with how you understand it. And I know all that sounds like more work. Like, even when I think about that, I'm like, oh, good, more work on my plate that I have to do. So, something that kind of keeps like me grounded is definitely make a goal on why you're doing all this work in the first place. Remind yourself just on that one little goal for now, something that's important to you that makes you say, I need to do this work for that goal, whatever that may be. And, don't lose sight of that driving force and bigger picture. Again, you get overwhelmed with something, say, okay, but what was that one goal? Okay, that's the thing that's giving me calm and peace at the end of the day. That's what I'm working towards. Cool. The other stuff is just white noise right now.
Excellent advice. I'm curious if you'd be comfortable sharing kind of your goal that you're working towards long term for your career.
Oh God, I have so many. I mean, I'm honestly trying to move to Europe. So, again, the Canadian dollar so bad. I'm just trying to make sure that I have like good sustainability while I'm over there. Like I want to be able to have that support so that, I can enjoy my new life, making new friends, exploring the new cultures while I'm over there. And I mean, yeah, on a completely off base personal note, I was thinking about having kids recently and, doing fertility treatments. And because I'm not ready yet in my life, I still have so many things I want to do. But I was like, oh, okay, this is another thing that we have to start planning financially for. And, it kind of gives me, like I said, that grounding where I'm like, wow, this is the bigger picture. It's not just buying the new car, the new house, which is fine if those are people's dreams. But for me, it's like looking at what do I want my life to be like and how am I going to get there? And one of those things is making sure you're staying on top of your content creation. You're making sure you're connecting to your audience. You're making sure that you're doing the work. And, you're getting that much closer to your goals and dreams every single time you do those things. And that can be a relief.
Yeah, no, for sure. I relate to you in so many things. So I was just thinking about those factors, very recent. I just turned 35 on Halloween. So I was
Hey,
like,
happy
man,
birthday.
thank you. I'm old now and it's on the record. That's awful. I was just thinking about like the kids and the family thing because I was like, okay, how do I even like I want to have a family one day, but also I know my fertility is a little bit I guess challenged in general just because of my health. But I'm like, man, I'm 35. If I'm going to plan for this, like when am I going to do that? Because I don't feel ready. Like there's so much more I want to achieve. Like so I was looking at kind of some of the options that you mentioned and trying to like almost like I guess reverse engineer like okay if I want my life to look like XYZ, what do I need to do and in what timelines and like kind of work backwards and then set goals.
Yeah.
And I find that that is kind of helpful because it takes like what it seems like an elephant and makes it into like bite-sized pieces.
Yeah.
I love that you said that because it can be so easy to just kind of go where the wind takes you and not be directionally focused in this career. You can be like, oh, like this was a good month, or oh, that platform did well this week, and oh, I might take this collab because they're here and why not? But like, you could also be really strategic about it and curve wherever you're trying to get a lot faster, and it's easy to get off track in that way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree.
After you've been spending obviously, a decade just bridging countries and platforms and perspectives, I guess what is one takeaway that you kind of hope the listeners will leave today's conversation remembering?
Oh God, definitely one takeaway that I hope everyone's listening to. And this is across not just this conversation, but every single conversation. Sex work is real work. We are doing taxes. We are dealing with legal hurdles. We are being CEOs of our accounting, our, distribution, directors. We are wearing so many hats. Like it is real work. And we have to respect that for ourselves, and other people need to respect that about us. We deserve rights, and sex workers are human beings. I think that's just the takeaway from all of this.
I love that. All right, Cecelia, can you plug all of your socials, all your sites, anything and anywhere people can find you so that when they hear this episode, they head over and click follow and all the rest?
Sure, I can do. So for Instagram, you can go to Cecelia, Cecelia .s.official. That's my Instagram. My Twitter handle is, that's an interesting one that I have to memorize, is again, Cecelia Sommer, SOMMERNN. You can go there, and all of my links are on all those pages and everything.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here with us today. This is awesome. You've dropped so many gems.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
This was so fun. All right, guys. So, what I think I love most about this conversation is that we're not just talking about, building a fan base, our normal topics. We're talking about understanding all of the systems around you, the laws, the cultures, the markets, It's about knowing how to adapt wherever you are in the world, and then without also losing yourself in the process. So I think this conversation reminds us that the adult industry really isn't one size fits all. It's absolutely an ecosystem, and the creators who thrive are the ones who stay just curious, strategic, and also connected to something bigger than the algorithm, as Cecelia said, those goals that you want at the end of the day. And if you are listening to this and thinking, that's where I want to be, I want to build really intentionally and expand globally and find a community that gets it, you don't have to figure that part out alone. That's why we at SWCEO built the CEO Society. It's a private, adult-only creator space where creators are just ready to move beyond survival mode and start scaling their income with strategy. So inside, you're going to find resources on content, marketing, monetization, mindset, also co-working spaces so you can join someone and not feel isolated while you do your admin tasks. It's built for this industry specifically by people who live it daily. So if that interests you, you can join us over there at cecelia.s.official, because ultimately this industry is always evolving. And when you have clarity and community and also confidence, you get to evolve faster. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, CEO Squad. I'll see you in the next one. As we wind down 2025, I want to take a second to acknowledge the people who made this podcast worth showing up for. To everyone who tuned in, shared an episode, or joined us live on the Twitter Spaces, we really appreciate you more than you know. And a huge thank you to just all the guests who showed up this year and poured their experiences into this community. This is our last episode for 2025. We'll be taking a short holiday break, so there won't be episodes on December 26th or January 2nd. We'll be back, however, on January 9th with fresh conversations, new tools, and some big creator strategy for 2026. If you want to stay connected during the break, come hang out with us inside the CEO Society. It is the easiest place to keep learning and stay plugged into the community. Come join me today there at ceosociety.app. Wishing you a warm and safe holiday season if you're celebrating. I hope you rest, recharge, take care of yourself, and I can't wait to see what's on the horizon for all of us in 2026. It would be absolutely incredible if you rated this podcast 5 stars and left a little review. We want to get this podcast to as many adult creators as possible, and you taking a second to leave a couple stars and a review really helps us do that. Thanks so much.